Hello, and welcome to this presentation from Sarah Neville at Knutsford Training and Consultancy on behalf of Childcare.co.uk. I'm talking about safeguarding today because it's the area of practice I am asked about most and the one that causes the majority of downgrades at Ofsted inspection. During Ofsted inspection, safeguarding is a limiting judgment. This means that if you mess up your safeguarding questions, you mess up your inspection. To help providers establish a secure safeguarding ethos in their settings, both childminders and group providers, I've written a series of quick reference cards for safeguarding, and I've recorded this presentation to use alongside the cards. You will find the cards on the childcare.co.uk free paperwork page when you log in. You can use them to test your knowledge. In group settings, you can use them for training. And you can print and laminate the cards, put them on a ring, so they're always immediately accessible if you need to check something. I suggest you fix them together with a piece of ribbon or string or one of those circular metal clips. Then, if information changes, you can take a card out and replace it quickly and easily. We will keep these cards up to date. We know, for example, that the government are consulting on local safeguarding children boards in the new year. So your local reporting information will need updating. During this presentation, I'm going to go through some of the cards that might be useful and talk in a little more detail about the underpinning knowledge you will need to answer safeguarding questions confidently during inspection. There are 4 main safeguarding and child protection documents noted in the EYFS that we need to be aware of. We must comply with working together to safeguard children. The government are consulting on changes to this at the moment. The consultation finishes in December, so nothing will happen until the new year, but we do need to keep an eye on it because it will mean changes to policy wording. What to do if you're worried a child is being abused contains the national reporting guidelines. Every local safeguarding children board has translated them in their own ways. And local safeguarding children boards are called different things across the country. I might be talking about MASH in one local authority, Stockport safeguarding in another. You'll need to translate it for your own authority. Keeping children safe in education is for schools, but the EYFS says we must have regard to it. This means we need to know about any parts of it that are relevant to us in early years. And of course, many providers work with older children. Information sharing covers how and when you share information about children with other agencies and professionals, when you need permission from parents and when you don't, things like that. You don't need these documents printed. You need to be able to access them in an emergency. You might find it helpful to put them into a file on your computer with any other safeguarding information. The safeguarding quick reference cards I'm talking about in this presentation start with your details, so they're easy to access by members of staff, visitors, whatever. You're saying these are my cards that I use to help me with safeguarding. I've made them and they reflect my business and my ways of working. Childminders, you're the designated safeguarding lead for your provision. Group providers, you will have a designated safeguarding lead and a deputy. If you work in a nursery or preschool and you're making up these cards for your staff, you should include their names. They're normally referred to as DSL and Deputy DSL. The next card is for your local safeguarding children board details. This is mine because I live in Cheshire East. Yours, as I said, might be called something different. You need to look on the website, find out what they're called, and find out their reporting procedures. Check the website regularly for updates. I'll send a newsletter which I bookmark to read Does yours do a newsletter or an email update or something similar? Online courses are great for staying up to date with safeguarding and child protection and new information, but only your local training can give you local reporting procedures, which you need to include in your policy. So I always recommend a combination of training is best. If your child doesn't live in your local authority, you do need to include their local Safeguarding Children Board details. I've given you a card to do this. The Childcare.co.uk free contracts include this question as well to prompt you to record the information. The next card deals with the 4 types of abuse. I remember them as PSE and N. Physical, sexual, emotional, neglect. Physical, non-accidental injury, unexplained marks and bruising, broken bones, burns and scalds. Children who are being excessively punished. Sexual, marks on genitals. Sexual abuse includes female genital mutilation and child sexual abuse. Emotional might include a child who's belittled, constantly criticised, humiliated or bullied, withdrawal of emotional support and affection at home, things like that. And neglect is the failure of a parent to provide for a child's needs. In Cheshire East, we've been given a neglect toolkit and we've been told not to refer a child until this is completed and the child reaches a certain score. It's important again to check on your local Safeguarding Children Board website and see what they expect you to do, sometimes before you make a referral. As you can see from this pie chart, neglect is the most commonly reported concern, and that's pretty much countrywide, with sexual abuse and physical abuse close behind. While emotional abuse isn't widely reported, it is impacted on by all the other. If a child is abused, they will be scarred. There's lots of information online, but make sure you only use trusted websites such as your local Safeguarding Children Board website and the NSPCC. You must be aware of the signs of abuse. I've already mentioned a few with the last card. We need to be alert to changes, things children say when they're talking to us or their friends, or during role play perhaps, things we observe when we're changing nappies and playing games with them. For example, a child might reenact parents fighting during role play, or tell you that daddy hits mummy when you're talking about families with them. Domestic violence happens in more households than you can imagine. Failure to thrive is something else that we need to be aware of. Unusual interactions with adults and parents, low self-esteem, what the EYFS refers to as self-confidence and self-awareness. There are lots of indicators. It's really important to know them. Your inspector might ask you about any one of the 4 types of abuse, so look them up and practice them, and then you'll be confident during inspection. It's important to stay updated as well. This means doing background reading, checking the latest guidance, looking at your safeguarding website, asking questions if you're not sure. For example, Ofsted recently gave a speech about the impact of domestic abuse on outcomes for children. I just know that some inspectors are going to start asking questions about it. It generally follows. You will again find lots of information on the NSPCC website, and you can ask colleagues if you're unsure. In your safeguarding cards booklet, I've included short information cards about female genital mutilation, child sexual exploitation, radicalisation and extremism, domestic abuse, safeguarding children with special educational needs and disabilities, breast ironing, which is something we all need to be aware of. I know it relates to the older children, but some of us may care for older children. Fabricated or induced illness, staying safe online, racism, bullying, private fostering, physical intervention, awareness of the signs of grooming, especially again if you have older children, and non-accidental injury sites on babies. Some local Safeguarding Children Boards have a non-mobile baby protocol, for example. Does yours? Have you checked? These are just very short introductions to different subjects that come up in safeguarding training, and need to be on our radar. They're a starting point for your own continuous professional development. If you don't think you know much about them, follow up with some background reading. The next series of cards help you to make a judgment about whether you might need to contact someone from another agency to get help for a child. Sometimes you need urgent help, and sometimes you might just want to chat and ask advice. If you have immediate concerns about a child's safety, you must call the police, 999, police, ambulance if necessary. Do not delay if you think a child is in immediate danger. If you have general concerns about a child's welfare, as a general rule, you would normally speak to parents and see if they give you a reasonable reason for the mark or the child's comment, and remind them to let you know about accidents or incidents that might have happened at home, so you can record them and support the child. The conversation might be after you've spotted a bruise or a mark, or the child said or done something that doesn't feel quite right. You listen, you watch, you ask parents, and then you need to think about what you're going to do with the information. Is the parent's response reasonable? Does it sound about right for the injury? A child has a bump and they say, they fell on the doorstep, and you know the child falls a lot. Or they say, older brother did it with a car, and you look after both children and you know older brother has a strong trajectory schema going on at the moment. Or they say, I can't remember, I'll have to get my wife, husband, or it was a wall, no, a door. Or the child says, Daddy did it, when you notice a mark on their foot. You'd react in different ways, wouldn't you? And it's very important that you know how to react and when to react. But if you suspect sexual abuse, then you refer straight away. It's above your pay grade to investigate. There are other times we refer straight away. We'll talk about those in a moment. When you're thinking about making a referral, you need to put the child first and keep in mind the psychological impact of abuse on a child: anxiety, personality, mood disorders, poor mental health, eating or sexual disorders, nightmares, lifelong addictions. It can be hard. We make friends with parents, don't we? They bought us a bottle of wine at Christmas. They can't possibly be abusing their child. You can't think like that. You have to put the child at the centre of everything. Who do you ring if you have a concern about a child's safety? In Cheshire East, we contact checks, as well as the police if we have an immediate concern about a child. Your safeguarding board, the people you contact, will, of course, be called something different. In some local authorities, they're called MASH, the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. You need to know who you ring, and you need to include the numbers in your safeguarding policy, and you can put them on the series of cards that are linked to this presentation. There should be a daytime number and an out of hours number. The cards do have space for this information, so it's there as a quick reference. As I briefly said, before ringing, Cheshire East have given us some rules we must follow. For example, we need to do the neglect screening tool. And we should always check the threshold of needs diagram first. Your local Safeguarding Children board will have a threshold of need diagram. It might look different from mine. It might be laid out in a completely different way. It might be called something different. It's usually a half moon shape with different colours for urgent and non-urgent thresholds. This is one of the reasons why local training is so important. I said we'd come back to when you must not speak to parents. The next card in the series covers this because it's so important. I think we all know that if we suspect sexual abuse, we must make the call, regardless of how nice parents seem. Every safeguarding board does have slightly different rules about this as well. But it's generally about whether it will make the child's life worse by telling parents what you suspect and sending them home. I've included the Cheshire East rules in the safeguarding cards because they are pretty universal, but if your safeguarding board has a different rule, you can write it on the back of the card before laminating it. The information should be in your policy as well. There's a free sample policy writing guide for safeguarding and child protection, and that's available for all Childcare.co.uk members on the website. Free members as well as gold. If a child makes a disclosure of abuse, we also need to be aware of the what to do if you're worried a child is being abused guidance, which tells us to be alert to issues, to question behaviour, to record everything because it will help to build a picture of the child, to think back, are there any historical concerns or is this a one-off? To look at attendance. Sometimes if they're off every time they've been somewhere at the weekend, it can suggest a problem. To ask for help. Don't sit on concerns. Even if it's a gut feeling, it will help to build a picture of the child's life. Your disclosure might be one part of a bigger jigsaw. To refer and to follow up. Does your local Safeguarding Children board provide you with a record of concern to complete? Do they have a specific form they want you to fill in? This is my Cheshire East one. Also think about what other record keeping is part of the wider safeguarding remit. Accidents that have happened at home, incidents that have happened at home. Mum might say the child's witnessed something going on at home at the weekend, for example. Existing injuries, a fall from the climbing frame, or baby's been clunked on the head by a train by a big brother. You can find record forms free of charge for all of these different things on the free childminder forms section of the website on childcare.co.uk. However, if your local authority safeguarding board has its own referral form, you will need to be using that. If an allegation is made about you or someone living or working on the premises, the next card in the series of safeguarding cards will help you to decide what to do about it. It's a horrible time. It's helpful to have something written down in black and white that you can follow. A parent rings you in the evening and says their child has alleged that you or your partner abused them. A parent questions a mark she spotted on the child's back and alleges it to be an adult bite. A parent says her child's bleeding from her bottom and she thinks it happened when the child was with you. These things can and do happen. They're usually accidents, but they might not be, and they cannot be swept under the carpet. If an allegation is made against you or against a family member or a visitor or a staff member, you must report it straight away. Don't sit on it and hope it'll go away. It won't. Record, report, deal with the fallout later. This also covers incidents when the police arrive on your doorstep to say a family member is suspected of doing something wrong involving children, or incidents that have happened over the weekend. If you're in any doubt, best advice is generally to ring and report and take advice for them. Let them decide if they need to know. If you have concerns about a colleague, this covers visitors and family members as well. Having concerns and having an allegation made are slightly different. If an allegation is made, as we've said, you must report immediately. Having concerns might be a colleague's engaged in inappropriate behaviour, or is making inappropriate comments, or is sharing inappropriate images. Inform your DSL, childminders, remember that's you. And then the same procedures must be followed. Record, report. Plus, ask them to leave the premises until it's been investigated. Think about your whistleblowing procedures. They should walk you through because it's a highly emotionally charged process. The next card in the series of safeguarding cards talks about the types of things you might note. For example, let's think back to little Ted's nursery when Vanessa George was taking and sharing abuse photos of children. The staff were a bit concerned, but nobody knew quite what to do, and she was friends with the boss. I've also included a card for group settings because, of course, if you work in a group, it's slightly different. If you don't work in a group, discard the card when it's printed. Group settings have a designated safeguarding lead and you must report it to them. But of course, if the allegation is against the DSL or the deputy DSL, you can, if you're concerned, report to your local Safeguarding Children Board, to the LADO, make the disclosure and let them follow up. If a child makes a disclosure of abuse at home, they might say, "Daddy hits me all the time and it hurts. Mummy banged my head against the wall. Mummy screamed at my sister and threw her into the garden and wouldn't let her come back in. My brother makes me do things I don't like in bed." We listen, don't interrupt, don't promise secrecy, don't dig or ask leading questions, just listen. We record as quickly as possible the date, the time, exactly what you remember the child said. Don't add your thoughts or embellish. This is just about the child's disclosure. And then we report immediately to the relevant authority. Again, your details will be in your safeguarding policy and you will have put them on previous cards. Follow up. If you told your DSL, they should come back to you and tell you what they've done with the information. If they don't do that, ask them. Don't ask lots of questions. Don't investigate. As I said, don't make promises. Don't try and manage it yourself. It can be a tough time. Pass it on. Let someone else investigate. The next safeguarding card I've included in the series is linked to the prevent duty, the legal requirement to report concerns about radicalisation or exposure to extremism. You might observe, for example, erratic attendance, hidden use of the internet, opposition to multiculturalism, anger towards the armed forces, gun or violent role play. Think about the risks in your local area. Do you live in a high-risk area for radicalisation and exposure to extremism? Do you look after older children who are on the internet at home unsupervised? Have you shared information with parents about safe internet use at home? You could add a couple of lines to your next newsletter. Part of prevent duty is giving children the resilience to say no if someone is trying to radicalise them or expose them to extremism, and the British government have decided that we must actively promote British values. It's nothing to do with flags or celebrating the Queen's birthday. That's learning about life in modern Britain. British values is about allowing the children to make choices, teaching them about rules and boundaries, developing their own likes and interests, being respectful of everyone, being tolerant of everyone's religions and cultures, teaching children to say please and thank you and things like that. British values should be embedded in everything you do. You don't need a special British Values Week. And if you don't like the term British values, that's fine. What are your values and how do they link in to giving children this resilience to say no if somebody is trying to radicalise them or expose them to extremism? It's part of how you keep children safe online as well. If you have phones and tablets lying around, make sure children can't access Google. This has come up in a few recent nursery inspections, by the way. And if children do use the internet, talk to them about how to stay safe, ban chat rooms, check their browsing history. I've included a card about children being left alone because this is a very contentious subject and a very confused subject. I put the card in because it does happen even with little ones. Parents go out in the evening to the shop and leave them in bed hoping they'll sleep, or they pop out and leave them with older siblings. There isn't an age at which a child can be left, but parents risk prosecution for doing it if their child is not competent and safe. The EYFS talks about reporting to Ofsted if there's a significant event. Significant can cover all sorts of things. It's a bit woolly. I normally advise colleagues to tell Ofsted about pretty much anything related to safeguarding. Report it and let Ofsted decide whether they want to know or not. They can screen out the reports they don't need. And if you have any other questions, there is a wealth of advice and guidance out there. As I've said, check your Safeguarding Children website. Go on some training. Try and get some local training in at least every 2 or 3 years. Every area has its own rules. It's no point asking me what your area does, because I don't know. I just know what Cheshire East does. You need to find out locally. Update your safeguarding policy. It's a brilliant way of making sure everything is spot on and you can remember the information when you read it, when you check through things. You'll also find support from colleagues on the Childminding Forum or on the Independent Childminders Facebook group. We are there to help. This has been a safeguarding presentation by Sarah Neville from Knutsford Training and Consultancy on behalf of Childcare.co.uk. I hope you found it useful and informative. Please remember your local safeguarding procedures might be slightly different from mine. That's why I can only give you a guide. The safeguarding cards that link to this presentation are on the Childcare.co.uk free paperwork page, along with lots of other documents that you may find useful in your practice. Thank you very much for listening.